That was a
I
lot of
dig it.
fun. I had a lot of fun
I
with this
agree.
game.
I wish I could have found a way to get back with the rest of the group. I really like this character anyway.
Yeah, it was.
We all had fun.
I wasn't sure quite where to where to roll with it, but I knew with this system it would be easy to kind of cut to different things and still have people involved in the action. It's just you couldn't necessarily be as directly involved with the other people, the other players. All right. You're still very much
No,
involved in the
I
story.
don't think it was bad at all. That was the only thing I kept trying to think of in my head. Like, how do I reconnect with everybody? Like, do I try to do that, or do I just be a silly side quest? But my silly side quest ended up being great for everybody. So yay.
Yeah, I guess we don't have a lot of. We already went overtime, but let's go overtime a little bit more and just give some sort of a reaction or feedback about your experience of the game. So something you thought about it, or something you really liked, or something you wish was a little bit different, or anything like that. Just pick one thing you want to say about the game system and the playtest experience. Because also, I would like to remind all of my players here that this is a playtest, and we agreed to do the playtest form and whatever, so please don't forget to do that tomorrow sometime, so that Robert Bowl and Evil Hat have the feedback they were looking for on the playtest period. So, with that, who'd like to go first?
I guess I'll go.
All
Over like so. For most people, I guess that are familiar with it, like I said, if I've said it, I think I've said it on stream too. Like, I do not like fantasy, as a general rule. This
It's okay
game's
to be
done
wrong.
I mean, like, I'm sorry. There's just more. Like, I'm sorry. There's just so much more interesting things in cyberpunk, sci-fi, etc.
Vox
But
is the same way for the most part. Just
yeah,
fantasy is boring to her.
some I've gotten onto some fantasy, but that's a whole nother thing. But just getting into the book itself made fantasy interesting to me, and seeing everything manifest and how everything play and how the game itself flows and how just like how things generally felt, it was really fun. Um, like normally I'm a big normally I'm big for things like crunchy customization and stuff like that, whereas this is a lot more contextual customization. Like, yeah, sure, my orcs are special or whatever, but there's really not a whole lot of mechanical manipulation in that, and it didn't feel it didn't feel like pandering, I guess is what I'm looking at. I felt like the decisions I made as far as crafting an entire species felt meaningful, and that was really cool. And just again, mechanically, it's loose, but it still feels really good. It's a lot of the roles, a lot of the moves are more or less vague moves, but they're easily definable. It's like, hey, I want to convince this person to do something in a violent way. It's like, wait, that's fine. You're still going to beguile them with violence. Um, and it's just like it's really just simple. It's really simple. It's easy to like pick up on just like the amount of roll, or amount of the types of rolls you'll make. The bonuses are typically small: +1, +2, -1, -2, and the gnosis traits are really interesting. I kind of wish we'd had more time to really play with those a bit more.
I have a feeling that plays out a lot more in a longer term campaign, but
Yeah, for sure.
I think we leaned on it a bit more this time than we had before. I think we kind of forgot about the help and hinder thing last time, the last couple sessions, but this time we pulled it in a bit more.
All right, that's glad. I'll have to check out the VOD later as well, just see, because like it's a really fun system, and like combat was interesting, social encounters were interesting. You don't run into the issue that I feel in a lot of other role-playing games. I won't say any names, where it's just like, hey, there's a bad person there, you should take care of it, and it's like, well, I guess I'll roll initiative. um like combat encounters felt as fluid as social encounters or just puzzle encounters, and it was just a matter of just like, this is a puzzle that takes an axe instead of other skills or this is a puzzle that requires talking, and it felt more like problem solving as opposed to just like, oh, there's 20 people here and that's how many hit points is that? Okay, cool. We need to take that down. So I really liked how just fluid everything feels and how well it all just meshes together, and you can just jump from thing to thing, and just really smooth. I just really enjoyed that aspect about it a lot.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. They very much echo a lot of mine as well. You had some insights that I hadn't thought of as well. So, who wants to go next?
This is my first time playing with a rule set like this. So I'm used to playing things that are a bit crunchier, which the reason I love RPGs is the role-playing element. I'm not good with rules. I will always forget rules, like even if I've deeply read the book. But I love the role-play element, and I really love the backworld and the story and the characters in this. I felt like the mechanics themselves aren't exactly my style. Like, there's a lot of freedom for the role-playing creativity, which I like more than most RPGs. But then I feel kind of tied back by the rules, where it's like, man, we want to do cool things, and it is that like sevens are the most commonly rolled number, and then sixes and fives and eights and nines are right after. So it's kind of like, I never feel like with the bonuses you get that you're ever really good at anything. And that kind of is frustrating because it's like, oh, I want to do this really cool thing that fails a lot, even though I rolled really well tonight.
And that's by design in
Yeah.
PBTA. The idea is that success but is more interesting than nailing it out of the water every time.
Right.
And there were a lot
Right.
more
And
10 pluses today than I was expecting.
yeah. And I like that things can fail at times, but I like being able to move that character forward. And I don't know if that would happen. Like with Three Tails, it's hard to say, but I don't know if that would happen in a way that I would appreciate. But like in terms of the mechanics, not as much of a fan. But in terms of the story and the RP, like this was one of the most fun games I've played.
Thanks. I agree.
Cool.
Who's next?
I'll talk next since I already interjected. So I have played. This is the second PBTA game that I have played.
Sprawl was the other one, right?
And Sprawl is the other one. So both of those were streamed, which
and that's on our Shadowcasters Network YouTube channel as well. Same place.
Yes.
These eventually too. Well, the first two episodes of this are already up there. So
yeah, season 2 coming sometime in the next 6 weeks.
Sweet.
As long as we can get our act together. But for one, I found it very interesting how both different and similar the experiences were. And I talked a bit about this before, I think, Cliff, when you stepped away for a second. But the experiences were similar and different. And it's difficult for me to decide which one I like better because you and Oz are very different game masters. So that's a different experience in itself. So one thing that I find difficult for me in both games, so I guess it's just a function of the system, is trying to figure out which basic move to use in situations, and also when I should be using a move instead of just role playing and going for it. So I feel like there are certain times that I kind of wished to have done more of that. Something that we did in the Sprawl more that we didn't have time for or we didn't do in here is player versus player moves. Like there are mechanical rules for lying to your fellow players, to the characters rather, not to players.
And this game system anticipates players opposing each other as well from time to time, it seems, in the rules, or at least anticipates that it might happen. And that's certainly an aspect that we didn't even touch on, because you all pretty well work together.
Yeah, I think...
Or at least not against one another.
Yeah, I think there's some kind of influences that as well.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think it's well, it depends on how you create the setting. because any one of these fantasy races, like the humans, I mean, I could have been a different style of but Ruga could very well have been a much more hardline orc. You know, you could have been much more human hating. You could have been much more everyone else hating even. So I feel as though the world that got created sort of not kiboshed, but reduced the amount of interplayer fiction. Now, I guess my last thing that I want to say is, and I speak for everyone, is that we don't want it to be over. We all had an excellent time, and thank you, Cliff, for having us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and it was a lot of fun. Opti or Trev, which one do you want to go next?
I don't mind going next. The same sort of things keep popping up in Robert Bowles games that I really, really like, and that's a certain social consciousness. I know he's tried really, really hard to make sure that these decisions and the moves and the interactions between people feels like taking the things that he believes are right and sort of trying to make those things attractive in the game form. And at the moment, like, he's doing it better than most of the people that most games I'm playing. So like I am just a super big fan of Roberts because I am like just stealing from him. Like, I'm just taking a lot of this stuff, like, and more just a lot of the I don't know, the heart, right, or the initiative behind it, rather
philosophy.
than mechanics. Yeah, the philosophy, and just saying, like, you know, games do not have to be what they have been before. You can actually, and what I think is great about him is he builds mechanics around doing, not necessarily doing what's right, but framing what's right and wrong, right? Like, so you don't necessarily have to do the right thing. He's not forcing you to do that, but in the interactions and in the consequences, you sort of get the idea of what is right and wrong, right? Like, the consequences, like, are meaningful in a way that most other games aren't, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, you can't play a Robert Bowl game without thinking about the world.
Yeah,
and from my perspective, I think I see role-playing games. They're not just a game. I mean, they are. They can be just fun to play, I guess. But they're a social experience. But they're also ultimately, the way I like to see it is they're an art form, and art forms exist to be an expression of humanity. They can be an expression of humanity just to share as a private group for your own experience, but also they can influence humanity as well. They reflect back who and what we are, and allow us to think about things in ways we might not have otherwise thought about them, or understand things more deeply than we might otherwise understand them. And I think Robert is pretty clearly an advocate for using games to do that, and that's so much in alignment with my values and hopes and what I want to do with my life. That when Opti said, hey, we should do a Demihumans thing, I was like, I didn't care how I was going to do it. I just knew I wanted to. Same thing when he brought up Misspent Youth, a year or two ago. I was like, yes, I've heard of this. I want to do this. This is the kind of gaming I want to do the most. But Trev, I didn't mean to sort of skip over your chance to chime in here.
No. I've been playing fantasy role-playing games since the early 80s. I mean, it's been a long time now, and I've played a lot of them. Demihumans is one of the only ones that I feel has inverted the theme successfully and in a meaningful way. The choice to use the Apocalypse engine to do it, where success or failure or make the hard move is considered, the more interesting approach to telling a story, when you're trying to tell the story of the inevitable diminishment of magic and you know the end of these people and their lives, I think it's an inspired choice, and I'm very thankful for that Robert was the one to make it, because I think he's one of the few designers working out there right now who would have tried to tackle mechanically or thematically a story like this, and he's really succeeded at it. The other thing I'd say is something I've said a few times in the past on Twitch and on Twitter, pardon me. Role players are the great untapped reserve of improv actors. And I think this group has really shown how true that is. It's been just a genuine pleasure to do this with you guys, and I hope it's only the first time, not the last time for me.
Yeah, this was your first live stream game. Well, not this session,
Yep.
but I mean this campaign here. So I
Sure
think
was.
you did a fantastic job, and it seemed like you've been doing it a long time. So
Thank you.
Agreed.
Happy we
you
had
were
you
a
among
very
us.
welcome addition.
Thank you.
yeah, I guess as far as me feedback goes, I've got a few minor things. Just like I think some of the things could be a little bit more clearly represented, but I also feel like maybe that has to do with me trying to absorb a whole game to run it the first time. I mean, you're going to miss things, right? So I'm not sure how many of those things were just my perception versus maybe this could be worded a little bit more clearly here or there. So I've got a few little points of feedback I'm going to submit, but my general overarching feedback is it seems to me that this game pretty well communicates what it's supposed to do. I feel like I was able to see its message and internalize it and then reflect it and play it with you all. And also, I guess I really love this style of gaming where it's you just, as a GM, you can't go in here with an idea like this is the adventure that we're gonna do. These are the different scenes. These are the things that are happening. These are what they're gonna do. This is what they have to do to get from X to Y and do this. Like, I walked into every single one of these adventures with like just the most bare ideas of maybe what I wanted to do, but with the idea I wanted to make those ideas secondary to what might be inspired by what the players did. And yeah, again, Palmer, that's sort of the we play to find out what happens is kind of the core idea of, I'm not sure if that's Powered by the Apocalypse or Blades in the Dark originated thing, but I'm not sure we need to find that line anyway, because they overlap pretty well with the different systems that have come out since. You can definitely see the influence of Forged in the Dark in the system as well as Powered by the Apocalypse.
The clock mechanics constantly coming up. Yeah.
Oh god, that was the most stressful first session of my life. Oh man, played Scum and Villainy. It was just like, all right, so you kicked a can opener. That's a clock. Wait, what? It's just like every roll. It's like I rolled a 4. Oh, you did what you did, but another clock shows up. It's like, wait, hold on.
Yeah, so it wasn't so much like adding in clocks left and right like maybe Forged in the Dark does, but the clocks are more like the pedals of mortality or human suspicion or a few of weariness for Aldea. And yeah, I have to say it's especially when you're doing a stream, it's very it makes me nervous going in with this idea of like I don't have this framework that I prepared to fall back on. Like what if we play and I don't get any good ideas? Well, there were a couple cases where I did feel a bit stumped, but I was able to kind of rely on you to help me build the narrative some, and just the co-creation was just fantastic. And I feel like Robert Bull encouraged that very well. The core original system ideas encouraged that really well. And sorry, Opti, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like there's no other system in which the stupid halfling with a golf club should have been able to take down the head wizard. But you're like, yeah, all right.
Yep.
And that's like that's so great. That made things so fun. I don't know. Again, like I don't. maybe I just need to play more Powered by the Apocalypse, but that just felt like an amazing thing to participate in.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll mention just about, I just love the idea of this sort of the way the combat breaks down with no initiative. It's not important who goes when or how many seconds pass or how many actions you have or whatever. Just roll around, make sure everyone gets involved, and try to come up with things that make sense.
Yeah, it's very cinematic, and I think, again, if people want to go back and watch some of the fight scenes that we had in the Sprawl stream, it really shows how you can make a fight scene very cinematic with these kind of rules and with the most simple combat rules, and you imagine it as a scene in a movie and describe it that way, and you end up with a much more dynamic type of combat.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. A lot of fun with the combat, a lot of the fun with the stuff that was not exactly combat, but just as high stakes.
Oh, I felt tense the entire time. Like, these 2 whole sessions, I was like, oh gosh.
And I love, like, when I was able to, I loved getting the feedback from Robert Bowl and then incorporating it in the next session. So after the first session, Robert was like, don't forget about the lifestyle. It's so important. Make sure if they do that, like, there's some sort of consequence. So, like, when Aruga did the thing where she snuck in and stole 3 gold from the town, I was like, yep, you do it. But, you know, you made the roll where, like, it was a partial success, right? Somewhere in the 7 to 9 range. Like, you pulled it off, but, like, an orc character that I had named in the previous session just killed by a crossbow bolt from a guard as you were escaping. Boom, that character's dead. Like, I could just throw down these deadly consequences. And, like, when an Aldea did that thing where she tried to connect with the orc mind and got that sort of vision of the blood visions, but also connected to all the other elven minds, and, like, all elves in the world became more weary of this world than they were. I love being able to throw around those. Wow, you could do the cool thing, and I'm a fan of that. You can do the amazing stuff, and you roll with it. But also, I'm gonna make it hurt.
Yep. You've always been good at that, where it's the consequences aren't like, oh, okay, well, you know, I lost this sword, but I'll find another one. It's things that are like, oh, I didn't think through my decisions very carefully. And that's part of the fun, where it's like, ooh, what can I do and hopefully get away with it where I don't hurt myself and those around me. But that was a huge consequence that felt really cool for the world that we built.
Awesome. Well, I think if we ever do this again, I think we'll do a Demi-Human stream at some point in the future. We'll have to decide whether we're going to continue in this world or a different one. I think we'll probably end up doing different characters and probably a somewhat different cast. But I'm totally looking forward to playing with all of you at some point in some way in other games or this one. And with that, I think we're about 45 minutes past our end time, so we should wrap things up with a raid. I think someone suggested we should raid Cole.
Yeah, Cole is going to be streaming Alien Isolation as soon as we're finished. So the stream has started over there. So if we head over there, it'll be starting as soon as we get there.
All right. So I just need to get the channel name down.
I was in the chat.
I've got it.
Yeah.
So just give me a moment to.
Cole, if you're listening to us, stop listening to us and go stream.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Thank you all again. It's been a privilege to play this with.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's been an absolute blast playing with you all.
Yeah, thank you all of you for playing this with me. Thank you for those of you in the chat who joined us. Thank you to all of you watching this in the future. And thank you to Robert Bowl for making the game that we've had so much fun to play and for supporting it so enthusiastically.
And us, the Shadowcasters Network. He's always, throwing people our way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to hit the raid button. And I got about 10 seconds before that goes over. Goodbye and good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.